fight with Mr. Nurmagomedov, and we are going to look at one particular part of his technique, which is beautiful. I'm going to break it down into tiny bits. Obviously he's not thinking about these tiny bits as he does it. He's just drilled it and it just is there for him. He's just worked on it and worked on it and worked on it. So I'm going to take this bit into tiny pieces. I hope you enjoy what I'm going to do. At this moment in time, we've got Ali Quinter, who's just escaped being taken down. He's had his back taken, he's briefly been on his back, and he's making his way to the cage. It's a really good scramble from Le Quinter. He knows exactly what to do. He knows to get his shoulder to the cage, he knows to get his hip to the cage, and he knows to get his foot and thigh and all his leg to the cage. So he's going to push himself against the cage. Khabib is going to follow him to the cage. He wants to get his hands together. At the moment he hasn't got his hands together. He's got a good grip on the lat. He's got a lot of pressure going down through his shoulder onto this shoulder and onto the top of the head. He's trying to stop Ali Quinter being able to get up. He's trying to get Le Quinter to put his hands on the ground. That's what he's trying to do. So let's see what's happening. Okay, so let's move it through. We should see Le Quinter move his side to the cage, move as much of his body to the cage as he can, and get some contact here. Alright, he is pretty much safe as long as this hand here does not get to this hand here. There's still a lot of weight going on. It's being pushed down into the top of Le Quinter's back. He's trying to keep him folded. He's trying to stop him getting to his legs. The hip against hip here is gauging what is happening here, and we will look at how he uses his legs as a kind of sensitive, sensory type sensor thing as we go along. So we'll move it along. He's going to slowly move along the cage as he tries to stand up. Khabib's going to give him a couple of digs in the head, but Ali Quinter manages to capture that left arm. So we're hopefully going to change camera position as we move through this. Okay, so we've changed camera position. Now we're seeing what's happened here. Le Quinter, as I say, puts his pressure against the cage. He's using it as a wall. This is a little bit far off the cage at the moment. He really wants that in a bit tighter. He's got two hands on Khabib's one hand, controlling it. Khabib has a lovely tight grip on the lat here. It's nice and dry. His weight is being driven down through this shoulder, keeping Le Quinter folded over. He wants to try and get Le Quinter to put his hands down, and he's keeping his ear by the shoulder as well. So at this moment in time, he's doing everything correctly as per usual. His hip is also gauged against Le Quinter's hip, and we're going to look at that in more detail in a minute, because it's something that a lot of people using the cage and using the grappling against the cage don't do. We need to add it to our game, so we'll scoot through this a little bit. So they're just wrestling and wrestling and wrestling. Again, I highlight the fact here that his hip is against his hip, and what he's doing is he's driving into this hip as much as he's driving into this upper body. It's just a fantastic thing to do. It's going to make Le Quinter at some point just put his hand down, because he's just going to boost him forward with his hip, which is going to make him tip forward and go to the ground, especially with this shoulder pressure on here. And he's still trying to reach through for this hand. He almost gets both hands down. If he'd got both hands down, he would have got his hands together and would have gone through that usual body hug, kind of taking Le Quinter's head over his hands, keeping him, you know, on the mat return, I suppose we would call it. So let's move him forward again. Again, we can see him drive that hip in. You see that little pop of the hip? You can see the thigh against the back of the thigh. So we saw the pop of the hip, the thigh against the back of the thigh. That's now controlling here. Now, if he had his hands together, there would be a possibility at this point for him to do a back sweep. He hasn't got his hands together, so he's still relying on this upper body pressure and the pressure from this hip against Le Quinter's body. Le Quinter is doing everything right. He's got everything tight against the cage. He's in a completely defensive position as he defends this arm here. Now, we'll look at what Conor does differently than Le Quinter. He uses this very similar system, but Le Quinter uses a hand over grip, so his hand is gripped over the wrist. We will see that Conor will actually reach underneath Khabib's chin and have his palm facing upwards as he's grabbing this wrist, but we'll look at that in a moment. But at this moment in time, Le Quinter is doing everything he can just to stop Khabib getting his hands together. So we'll move this a little bit more forward in time. And now what we're seeing is we're starting to see, stay there, we're starting to see LaQuinta is based out. Alright, so he's starting to build his way up straight. He's starting to try and get his back to the cage, maybe. But he's in a really good spot with his shoulder against the cage, his hip against the cage, and now all the back of this leg is against the cage. Even if Khabib gets his hand out of here, it's going to be difficult for him to go and take an ankle pick from here. Again, maybe there's a possibility here for the back sweep, but at this moment in time, if you look at what his dad's taught in some seminars, this hip, this nick of Khabib's hip is against LaQuinta's hip. He's using it like a sensor. He's kind of feeling where he's going. He's also using it as a force. He's actually pushing this into the body. It's absolutely amazing. Right, so we're going to take this a bit further. And right, this is where it starts to go wrong for LaQuinta. So he's got his hand over grip on the wrist, as I said before. What Khabib wants to do is he wants to get his hand through toward the single leg. He wants to get to the single leg. So what Khabib is going to do is he's going to use an amazing bit of technique right now. He's starting to lift this arm. As he starts to lift this arm, he's already making it uncomfy for this hand grip to be on here. I think LaQuinta's cheating a little bit here. He's holding the glove maybe. Don't blame him. I'd be pooing my pants as well. But there's loads of pressure going onto this arm. And what we're going to slowly see is we're going to see Khabib take his arm up and bring his head underneath this arm. It's going to make the arm separate off. So we will see him raise the arm, and then we'll see him raise it, and he puts his head underneath the arm. Boomf. Yeah, so we can see that starting to happen now. This grip is already difficult for LaQuinta. Yeah, his wrist is turning the wrong way. Because of the pressure on this arm, yeah, that grip is starting to be difficult to maintain. Alright, so he still raises his arm, and suddenly his head is underneath the arm. Khabib's head is now underneath the arm, and what he's going to slowly do is he's going to slowly drive his head into that gap. LaQuinta is already losing this grip. Khabib's head is coming into this gap. This is slowly being broken. So as we can see, he forces in. Now at this point his head slides up the chest, and we're going to see his shoulder pop under the wrist. So he's going to drop his shoulder and pop it under the wrist, boomf, and now he's going to drive through, boom. And as he drives through, we now see LaQuinta having to let go of this hand. He's having to let go of this wrist, and he's only got his hand gripped on the tape and the glove of this hand. Now LaQuinta, being a decent wrestler, knows instantly what he wants to do to stop this single leg. Khabib's hand is down here. We've seen the fingers turned up. He knows that he's going to go to a single leg. So what LaQuinta wants to do is he wants to drop this arm down as an overhook and probably lift Khabib up through his body. Now that would be good if Khabib was going to do the traditional takedowns, if he was going to do the cut that he loves, or run the pipe that he loves, or even switch out to the knee tap or double leg. But we know what Khabib is actually going to do at this point. He's probably going to go for a lift and sweep. I know he's going to do that because I've watched this a few times. So now what the battle is to get this hand to this hand. Okay, it's important that this palm is facing up, and I'll show you why in a bit. Okay, but it's important that this palm is facing up. It's acting as a hook. You know, he's cupping his, I'd like to say, thigh at this point, and he's going to move up to a grip deep within the crotch, which sounds really rude, but you know what I'm saying. So now we're going to watch Khabib remove this hand using technique, and it's all in the head. There's loads of pressure going through the body into the shoulder to hold LaQuinta onto the cage, and LaQuinta is going to do the sensible thing of going with the overhook. Okay, so now Khabib is going to start getting this hand out of here. So he's going to go into using some Aikido. He's going to put his head onto... He's not really using Aikido, by the way. I just said that because I know someone will say something in the comments. He's going to put his head onto the bicep, and he's going to start bringing that hand downwards. Okay? So he's going to start bringing that hand downwards again. And as he brings that hand downwards, he's going to twist the grip on the wrist, and that's going to force, see that, the grip to pop through the weakness between the thumb and the finger. So it's gone between the thumb and the finger. So LaQuinta at this point actually thinks he's okay because he's got an underhook. Everyone's taught that they need an underhook. Alright, but he hasn't got an underhook because all this is in the way. His head's on the bicep. That is never going to get around that corner, and it's never going to make that underhook. Alright, so what we see here is we see LaQuinta in a fantastic place, apart from the fact that he's not. Because this is in the way. The head is on the bicep. This is never going to establish that underhook. We'll see him work now because he realizes that underhook doesn't go in. So what he does is he tries to re-grab the wrist. So the underhook doesn't work. Oh shit, I'm going to try and re-grab that wrist. Okay, now that's the perfect time for Khabib. There is no grip here. So he's just going to pummel his hand on the inside to get his hands together. Boomf. And we have him now firmly gripped around LaQuinta's leg. Pretty up, high crotch, wise-ish type thing. His head again is against the bicep. This makes this arm weak. So the pressure is going through here. It makes this arm weak so that this is really not going to be able to pull this arm up. Okay, it's just such a clever bit of technique. The palm of the right arm is facing up. The palm of the left hand is facing down. And this forms a little kind of hook around the back of his body. At some point in the future, I'll make a technique video that shows you how to do this. But just have belief in me at the moment. This is going to have a little hook around his body, which is going to make lifting LaQuinta a lot easier. What we're going to see now is we're going to see Khabib step into the control zone. So he's going to take his right leg and he's going to step into the control zone. But what he's done is he stepped at this point. He's not stepped right in at the cage, because what he wants to do is he wants to lift LaQuinta off the cage. He wants to take LaQuinta away from the cage so that he doesn't have any of this side balancing on the cage. No weight on the cage. As he does this, all he's going to do is he's just going to stand up straight, really. He's just going to stand up. Boom. And as he stands up, he lifts LaQuinta into the sky. LaQuinta's leg comes away from the cage, his hip comes away from the cage, and his shoulder comes away from the cage. And there's that moment that every wrestler fears where everything is in the sky. Alright? We see that Khabib is looking down in this direction. What he's waiting for the moment, just that minute microsecond before this foot hits the floor. Now, this is just drilling and drilling and drilling and drilling and drilling and drilling. Yeah, if you've ever done judo practice, you spend hours just doing these foot sweeps as people skip along the ground, okay? So he will have done this many, many times. So LaQuinta is now going to slowly, in this case, put his foot down on the ground, and as that foot hits the floor, Khabib's other foot, get right in the right place, Khabib's other foot is just going to come back and he's going to sweep this leg out. Now, this isn't all to this technique, all right? The fulcrum is at this point, and he's going to remove this fulcrum to more central to his body as he falls. That's going to take LaQuinta's back away from the cage so that he falls alongside the cage. So even at this point, he's not thinking of taking LaQuinta down against the cage. He's thinking of taking LaQuinta down the side of the cage. Well, maybe he's not thinking that, but that's what he's been programmed to do. This is really high. LaQuinta at this point is either bracing himself to fall over, he wants to push himself away and get his back to the cage. Yeah, he might be trying to limp his leg out of here. It's not going to happen. He's in the sky. So Khabib now is just going to sweep this leg and he's going to dunk our LaQuinta onto the ground. And as soon as he hits the ground, he's going to dominate those hips. He starts reaching for this arm here. All right. It's an absolutely beautiful technique to become dominant and take him down and be on top. So that's my little breakdown of Khabib. It's beautiful. I mean, especially the hand fighting. He's using his head, he's using other tools within the hand fighting, and it's wonderful. And if you can do it, good luck. So I'm going to take you now through what Conor did that LaQuinta didn't do. So this is the third round of the fight between Conor and Khabib. We're still seeing Khabib use exactly the same set of techniques here. Conor, unlike LaQuinta, has got an underhook, but it's a cross-body underhook, all right? And what he's going to do is he's going to control this arm around where the bicep is and around where the wrist is by taking it under his body. This is going to stop our Khabib being able to take his head down below the arm. So we'll just take it forward until we get to the right place. Right, so there we go. You can see that Conor is stopping him getting his hands together. I mean, Khabib is still trying to get his hands together on the waist. Conor is keeping his back to the cage, so it's going to be difficult for Khabib to get his hands together, and he's using his head. But it's this that's stopping Khabib getting down to the single leg. I mean, just before this, he did get single leg down, but we're looking at this bit as a bit of a different kind of defense here. It's working quite effectively. So if we walk through this, we can see how effective this is. Khabib cannot get down to get to that single leg. He can't drag himself down because Conor is completely lifting that up. He's using his head and he's using that control. So if we compare that to La Quinta, where he was holding the top of the wrist here with this hand, it just allowed Khabib to get underneath. Conor in this case is stopping that by controlling this with this, I don't know, what do you call it? A reverse underhook, some kind of underhook, crossbody underhook, not a clue, underhook. Oops, sorry, not a swear. But we're seeing him control the wrist and control the triceps. His thumb is in the armpit, and he's lifting him up to stop him getting to that single leg. So if we just take it forward, it works, it works, it works. He's controlling the wrist, he's controlling the arm, he's stopping it getting together, and he keeps lifting it. Absolutely beautiful, Conor. Sadly, it didn't work because you got tired, so bless you. Anyway, that's just to show you the difference between what La Quinta was doing and what Conor was doing. Sorry for the swear word. I will beep it out somehow or something, or maybe not.